Hi, I'm Vanessa and I love bad Star Trek. I break down the bad episodes of my favorite show so you don't have to watch it. I will be the hot pitchfork that is Star Trek's The Next Generation. Today I will be talking to you about an episode called Devil's Due. The only way that this is at all watchable is to think of this as a Marvel's What If episode. Like, what if Picard got to play out his ultimate fantasy of going toe-to-toe with the devil and litigating his way out of hell. Watch him and his legal team beat paperwork to a pulp, whiz, zestily prepare filings, zow, take depositions, pow, bait stamps docs from Discovery, wazam, with his trusty sidekick, Peter Paralegal, who is also the judge in this episode. Will they successfully find the loophole that will save their soul? Or will satin-covered Satan, with hair doused in mousse, kick their caboose on this episode of Space Court? Dun dun! After taking on God, aka Q, in the premiere, and Measure of a Man, and with a drumhead later in season 4. Thank God someone said something, because maybe if it hadn't been for this CSI Nowhere, we'd be endlessly pelted with Moonwalk Matlock episodes about the edge of your seat minutia of legal processes. If they played this like the ridiculous thing that it is, then we could have Picard basically being Harvey Birdman, attorney at law, representing the Church of Satan, because of course he would. But instead it's played kind of straight, because Picard's writing makes him once again the victim of a series of pranks, it seems, and his steady disposition and logic pitted against a comic book villain makes this a bit of Trek flavored kitsch. But buried all the way underneath the camp and the court stuff, there is this one tiny diamond of wisdom, a grain of a salient point on a vast beach of bullcrap. And if this episode wasn't just a rewrite of a rewrite of a rewrite, it might have had much more impact. But there is so much focus on this villain character convincing Picard that she's really the devil, that the point is completely lost at sea. Apparently, this script had been tossed around a bit since the original series, meaning that this was actually originally written for Kirk to be the litigator. So Melinda Snodgrass had the unenviable task of transposing this script to the Next Generation. And in the process, it became too funny. So they felt that to fit the Next Generation, they had to dial back the comedy substantially, which I think was their biggest mistake. The one scene I think is worth watching is at the very beginning, when Data is practicing his acting on the holodeck with Picard watching and coaching, and Data is doing a bit of monologue from A Christmas Carol as Scrooge. And like most of Data's hobbies, it relies on a very intimate knowledge of human emotion, something he's mostly incapable of personally experiencing.
Sir, I have modified the method for my own uses. Since I have no emotional awareness to create a performance, I am attempting to use performance to create emotional awareness.
But through the character of Scrooge, Data sees that he may be able to reverse engineer human emotions, like fear, and better understand humanity through performance, which is a really intriguing breadcrumb. But the trail doesn't lead to a gingerbread house with an oven-roasted witch ready to eat. Instead, we get romper room foolery. The Enterprise D gets a distress call from a Federation station on a planet called Ventax 2, where the project manager, Dr. Clark, the only guy they could beam out of the bedlam, said that everyone on the entire planet is completely freaking out because it's the end of the world as they know it, and no, they're not fine. And for some reason, this motivated some mob of religious zealots to take scientists on the station hostage. For what end, it's not entirely clear. The Doctor explains that according to the myths written on some ancient scrolls, that the Ventaxians decided to purchase 1,000 years of peace and prosperity with no war or famine from a divine being named Ardra, better known as the devil.
Akos Jared, the Ventaxian head of state, began to grow increasingly obsessed with the legend of Ardra.
Who is this Ardra?
For all intents and purposes, the devil.
In exchange for enslaving everyone at the end of that 1,000 years. Not sure why that was thought of as a good deal, and I'm not clear how this incentivizes the apparent progress that the society made from that point, since it's now considered idyllic and agrarian and ecological sanctuary and not the industrialized shithole that it used to be. So the planet's people pulled together and solved their pollution issues to be enslaved in a millennium? Why wouldn't they just leave? I guess I just don't understand Ventaxian culture. But now Ardra's about to return because the 1,000 years are up, and other signs like little earthquakes, and people on the planet are having dreams about her, and that might be because when Ardra does make her grand entrance, she's looking like the lead singer of Flock of Seagulls.
Time's up.
Her hair is higher than my ambitions in life. And after demonstrating that she can transform into the Klingon sort of devil Feklur, Ardra then orders the hostages released. So that plot point never matters. And like any evil being from the darkest and hottest pits of hell, she delegates out administrative busy work.
Now, the first thing we'll need is an accounting of all you've been accumulating for me. This form will provide guidelines for a full census of the population, with emphasis on productivity and economic forecasts.
Fill out these spreadsheets, save them as new versions, and redline them against the previous year, and send them to me as a PDF. Meanwhile, Picard starts the discovery ball rolling. He almost sounds like he's dropping a cool, badass catchphrase like, "I'll be back," or "This croc ain't no puppy," but it comes out like,
Jared, with your permission, I'd like Mr. Data to review these scrolls thoroughly.
"Let's look over that contract." And now I can't see. After the hostages are released, Picard heads back to the ship and tells everyone this woman can't be the devil. That's ridiculous. I mean, Captain Kirk did meet and defend the actual devil in court back on Magus 2, but that was in a completely different dimension. This chick just knows how to use a transporter to do magic tricks.
Her powers are the best unclear. Think about it, Mr. Worf. Transporter technology can make things appear and disappear. The illusion that she can transform herself into a Klingon creature could be created by holographic projection.
And Andra pulls what I guess would be termed a Q and wears a uniform on the bridge to piss off Picard. And Data reports to everyone that the contract appears to be rock solid.
Contract agrees to deliver the people of Ventax 2 into the personal servitude of Ardra after 1,000 years of peace. I have compared the terms to the body of laws which govern the planet. The language of the agreement is correct in every detail, sir.
And not only does it mean that she owns everything and everyone on the planet, she also owns everything in orbit, and that technically includes the Enterprise. So if you don't think a court case is going down before this, you definitely do now. It's almost like you can hear the People's Court theme in your head. Dun, dun, dun. Dun, 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 dun. Nothing gets Picard more amped than litigation. Now he's digging, going through the legal library in the form of finding Ventaxian legal precedent to challenge Ardra's claim. And who will sniff it out? His sidekick, Peter Paralegal, of course, finding citations in a single bound.
I need to find a loophole. Some way of challenging the validity of this contract.
Sir, the language of the contract seems carefully chosen to avoid any loopholes.
Check it again, Mr. Data, and check every Ventaxian legal precedent for the last 1,000 years.
I purposefully didn't pick this episode because of what happens next, but it's an interesting pattern that I'm starting to pick up on, because we have a scene, which I think is the worst, where Ardra just shows up in Picard's quarters while he's in his PJs, and she attempts to seduce him. On Memory Alpha, it should be noted that they chose to make Ardra a woman to make it more fun, and I guess this is the fun that they had in mind. Sort of like the shit that they had with Lwaxana Troi. Apparently the writers find it hilarious to have Picard be sexually harassed. But nothing turns Picard off quite like showing up uninvited, really. But there's also a completely unnecessary tinge of slut-shaming in his reasons for not being into Ardra, because he doesn't confront her about being in his room uninvited like a normal person, so much as state that he's just turned off by her being obvious and vulgar.
You know, there's nothing about you I find tantalizing. On the contrary, I find you obvious and vulgar.
So it's slightly funny to me that she snaps her fingers and changes into a hoop skirt with nothing showing from the neck down. Oh, would you like someone prim and proper? As an obvious and vulgar person myself, I got a chuckle out of that. But she's like poison ivy that you ordered on Wish. And he's no Batman, and he doesn't have a thing for weed and redheads. Of course Picard's gonna tell her to fuck off because he just thinks she's a con artist. So Ardra exacts revenge for being rejected in a way that Q also might, by putting him on the planet's surface wearing his PJs. A scandal! They made it seem like Picard without his uniform on outside of his quarters was some big deal, but the only person who cared was Picard. They also couldn't just beam him back to his room because the transporters were down. So he asked Data to pilot a shuttle to get him back onto the Enterprise with a uniform. Like, if they're gonna go goofy, they should have just taken this opportunity to go all the way. Like, make him fully naked, so that when Data tells him on the shuttle that there is legal precedent for challenging a contract, it would have been more of a satisfying gotcha moment.
Sir, I believe I have found an obscure precedent in Ventaxian law which may be of interest.
Yes?
The case involves a contract dispute over services rendered by a Klingon craftsman on the construction of a Ventaxian home. Because the dispute involved an alien culture, the parties decided that arbitration, rather than the courts, should resolve the issue.
But then things are kind of thrown off here and the Enterprise vanishes, and Geordi, who thankfully is on the planet's surface, says that he can't detect the Enterprise anywhere. But even then, the stakes aren't quite high enough, because when Picard challenges Ardra to this legally permissible arbitration, she's like, why would I do it? I already have the planet and everybody on it and your ship. Picard goes, I can bring you to a rare emerald. And Ardra says, how about this? I get you mind, body, and soul. And he agrees to these terms because he's a cocky guy in a courtroom. Especially after Measure of a Man, they even fully copy a source of conflict from that episode by both Ardra and Picard agreeing that Data should be the arbitrator. Because Brent Spiner understands the assignment, he sees that Data would have a little bit of fun with this by shooting down Picard's arguments in court.
Captain Picard, my interpretation of Ventaxian law suggests that under these circumstances, this is acceptable. Your objection is overruled.
But Your Honor,
Sir, I have ruled.
Yes, this completely trivializes the stakes, since Picard being a sex slave to the devil would otherwise motivate someone to maybe not dunk on him quite so hard. And per the usual, casting aspersions on Ardra's abilities is like a trigger for her or something. And she decides to use her powers to order from Wish again. And this time it's a devil costume from like that movie Legend. There's a family movie somewhere on VHS of my baby brother screaming and crying while my mom is like rubbing red paint on his face. And was for Halloween. She dressed up her somewhat new baby as the devil. And he's got these massive black chevroned eyebrows and a painted on goatee. And at 0 years old, he was a much more convincing portrayal than whatever the hell is going on here. The devil's got way better taste, okay? I know him. If plastic horns and red paint were meant to instill fear, it definitely didn't translate. Picard's questioning of Jared, who I guess is the representative of all Ventaxians, who led the mob who held the science station hostage, was where there is an inkling of some moral takeaway, where he shows that similar to Scrooge being motivated by fear, they were motivated by making a deal with the devil, but ultimately accomplished everything under their own power. Did Ardra create or literally do anything to contribute to their progress or make the planet prosperous? And he couldn't confirm that, so he said no.
Did she not even pick up one piece of trash?
Ardra had left Ventex 2 before the environmental reforms began.
With a lot of courage, hard work, your ancestors changed this world all by themselves.
When Geordi shows up and he's got news about Ardra's powers because he found her ship and power source, it is game fucking over, because Ardra doesn't have access to her powers anymore, but Picard does. So he turns into the Klingon Feklur and he'll do a trick and he'll ask Ardra to undo it, which should be a cinch. And she can't. They reveal that her magic is, in fact, just transporter stuff that the Enterprise could easily duplicate. And Ardra had a device in her eye that gave her remote control. So mask off. Not only that, but her ship's records had confirmed that she was indeed known by many names. Why would you keep records of all your aliases in the same space? So she has to forfeit her claim, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Like, this could have been a fun detour, like a next generation version of a Mirror Universe episode or a Captain Proton episode on Voyager, or they could have narratively realized the idea of fear as an ineffective motivation tool, or self-determination being the ultimate driver of progress. A criticism of zealotry or even religion in general, but none of these avenues are explored, and we just get a ticked off Picard having his paralegal rifle through paperwork for citations against a sexy devil, which is fun in its own way, but not in the way the writers intended. Like, subscribe, no pressure, but peer pressure. Till next time, I guess.